Shalom to the elect. Gotta give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rekah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim pushing this truth throughout the four winds of the earth, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Akwaf who are listening and learning. Coming into another lesson, Lord, wouldn't it be edifying? Now this is another Edomite who who's bringing out the history about the Rothschilds and Winston Churchill and how the Rothschilds took over Israel, how they got their land in the first place. So he's bringing out some very edifying history on how the Rothschilds got the land of Israel. Now I'm going to read a couple of precepts and then I'm going to let him ride out. Now the lesson, the video is like an hour long, so I'm just going to catch about 20-30 minutes of it, like 20 minutes of maybe 25 minutes. I'm going to read these precepts because he's letting you know how these heathens took over our land. So this is Psalms chapter 79 verse 1. It say, O power, the heathen are coming to thy inheritance. Thy holy temple have they defiled. They have laid Jerusalem on heaps. And this is what they did, man. They took over our land, okay, and destroyed it, man. Now this is Ezekiel chapter 7 and verse 24. And it reads, Wherefore I will bring the worst of the heathen, and they shall possess their houses. I will also make the pomp of the strong to cease. That meaning the pomp is talking about the excellency. Okay? So I will make the pomp of the strong to cease, and their holy places shall he defile. Shall the Gentiles, and the holy places shall be defiled. Okay? He said, Wherefore I will bring the worst of the heathen, and they shall possess their houses. Because the heathen took over our land, man. Okay? And they're still in that land to this day. Now this is Ezekiel 36 and verse 5, and it reads, Therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh power, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession, with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. And this is what they did, man. Okay, Idumea is the Greek way of saying Edom, man. He said all Idumea, okay, all the Edomites, every last one of them. Now this is First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 45. Because this is going into more history. First Maccabees chapter 3 verse 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and the aliens kept a stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. So Jerusalem is laid on heaps, man, because of these heathens has took over the land. Okay, this is Zechariah chapter 9 verse 6. And a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off all the pride of the Philistines. Okay, the point is, and a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. Ashdod is a city in Israel, man, where these heathens is destroying our nation, man. It's destroying our land. So I'm gonna start this video at like 16:53, like right at 17 minutes, because this one he go to get into the point. Now it's good to watch the whole video, but I'm just trying to get a few points that he's making in this lesson. So Lord's willing to be edifying.
These are points that will help to explain why Churchill was so supportive of the Zionist movement and the role that he played in bringing about the state of Israel. Winston Churchill's father, Lord Randolph, maintained a very close circle of powerful Jewish friends. And that's a circumstance that young Winston observed when he was a child. One of those Jewish bankers was Sir Ernest Cassel. Um, Churchill was indoctrinated at an early age with principles of Zionism. He was taught that um, a non-Jew such as himself could bring great blessings on himself by being supportive of the Jews. Do for the Jews and you get something in return from God. It's the same kind of Zionist propaganda that inspired the Scofield Bible, which gave birth to the Christian Zionist movement in America. Well, among his father's closest friends were members of the powerful Rothschild family, the Rothschilds themselves. In fact, when Winston's father passed away while he was still a boy, Winston was looked after by his father's Jewish friends. Sir Cassel not only took care of the boy's finances when he was young, but actually continued to manage Churchill's finances for free throughout his entire adult life. And it was the Jewish Rothschilds who personally intervened to help Winston get his first job. These Jews helped Winston to get his start in politics as well. When he was first elected to the British Parliament, a third of Churchill's constituents were Jewish. At the time, there was and here's how it came about partly, there was this bill in Parliament that put restrictions on how many Jews could immigrate into the United Kingdom. And the Jews didn't like that. They didn't like the immigration restriction. So Churchill promised them that if they would vote for him, if they would put him in office, he would get in there and he would oppose this bill. And so the Jews threw their support behind Churchill. And of course, having the backing of the powerful Rothschild family was helpful as well. Now, in those early political days, Churchill formed an alliance with a Russian Jew in England named Chaim Weizmann. Remember that name, Weizmann. We're going to come back to it several times. This is the man who went on to become the first president of Israel. Well, Churchill constantly lobbied the British government to create a Jewish state in Palestine. That was his big mission. You all have heard, I'm sure, about the Balfour Declaration, 1917, in which the British government wrote this letter to the Rothschilds declaring support for a Jewish state in Palestine, right? Well, one of the primary brokers of that deal was Winston Churchill, who of course was a Rothschild loyalist. In fact, 3 years after the Balfour Declaration was signed, the British government put Churchill in charge of enforcing the Balfour Declaration and developing conditions for the creation of the Jewish state in Israel. So let's go over a little bit of the deal making that went on during this time, because much of that geopolitical gerrymandering by the Rothschilds and their various puppets in the British government, it set the stage for a lot of the turmoil that exists in the world today. All right, in the late 1800s, the Rothschilds were driving, they were the driving force behind the Zionist movement. They were setting up Jewish colonies among the Native American population there in Palestine. And one of these Rothschilds, Edmund James de Rothschild, he set up several Jewish settlements, and these settlements were called Yishuv. In 1901, some of the Jewish colonists took issue with Rothschild's management of the Yishuv, and so he wrote back in an angry reply, quote, "I created the Yishuv, I alone. Therefore, no men, neither colonists nor organizations, have the right to interfere with my plans." That's Rothschild, Edmund James. The early movement to relocate the Jews. Remember, the Jews were not living in Palestine at this time. Very, very few of them. The early movement to relocate Jews from around the world to Arab Palestine, that was a Rothschild plot from the very beginning. And historical records prove that this was underway a long time before Hitler came along. So the excuse that the Jews needed the lands of Palestine because of how they were treated by the Nazis, that was That was late-term propaganda to re-energize, to undergird an ongoing Rothschild operation that had already been rolling for decades. I had mentioned earlier that Winston Churchill claimed to support Zionism because the Zionist Jews opposed the Bolshevik Jews in Russia. But what I observed in that article that Churchill did not mention is that in 1905, the Rothschilds had a Zionist puppet in Russia named Georgy Apollonovich Gapon, or Gapon, who led a coup against the Russian Tsar. It failed. They tried and failed. And those Zionist Jews had to flee to Germany for refuge, where the Rothschilds took them in there. But the incident highlights an important point about the makeup of today's New World Order. In past videos, I've gone into detail explaining how the New World Order is organized. While I don't personally ever use the phrase Jew World Order, as I see some people do down in the comments, I don't do that. To me, it just sounds unnecessarily provocative, it sounds unkind, it sounds offensive. But still, the truth is that the New World Order really is largely composed of two competing factions that are Jewish, and that is not a conspiracy theory, though it is, as Churchill himself said in the article I read, it is a worldwide conspiracy of Jews. The New World Order seeks the common goal of global domination through world government, but within the New World Order, you've got competing Jewish factions. Churchill talked about the Bolshevik Jews. These Jews were Marxist Jews. They followed Karl Marx's teachings. Then you've got the Zionist Jews. These competing factions from the early 1900s, they continue to be the competing factions in the New World Order today. For example, George Soros. We all know that he's a globalist. We all know that he's a Jew. But it surprises a lot of people to learn George Soros is not a Zionist. He is staunchly anti-Israel. He is anti-Zionist to his core. He falls into that Marxist globalist camp, whereas you've got powerful Jews like Henry Kissinger and many of the Jews that Donald Trump uses as his top advisors. Those are from the camp of the Zionist Jews. So again, we have to remember Churchill's words. Let me read just a couple sentences here again. He wrote, from the days of Adam Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx and down to Trotsky in Russia, Bela Kun in Hungary, Rosa Luxemburg in Germany, and Emma Goldman in the United States, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence, and impossible equality has been steadily growing. See, Churchill, what he was doing was engaging in a polemical argument against the Marxist Jews, while himself promoting the agenda of the equally ambitious Zionist Jews. He was very partisan, even though he gave the appearance early on that he was being fair and neutral. He's anything but neutral. Churchill was an avowed Zionist. And let's get back to the history here. If we go to Volume 2, page 497 of the Jewish Encyclopedia, let me read what it says. Quote, it is a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds, that at the present time the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. Now, what does that mean? In the 1800s, the Catholic Pope needed money. And that meant he needed the help of the Rothschilds, because they had the money. The Rothschilds gave several massive loans to the Pope, and as a result of these ongoing interactions and the deal making, the House of Rothschild became the trustee of the Vatican's wealth, taking control over the financial operations of the worldwide Catholic Church. And today, the Vatican Bank continues to be interlocked in the larger Rothschild international banking system. Now, at this point, I could go back in and talk about the Rothschild connection to the Jesuit order and the Black Pope, or talk about how the Jewish Adam Weishaupt ended up becoming a Jesuit who was later hired by the Rothschilds to establish the Bavarian Illuminati and to develop a plan for secret world conquest, which is exactly what happened. But that would take us too far off track in this video, so let's keep moving here. 1906, the Rothschilds have far more wealth than the public realizes, and that's because they hide a lot of it in front companies. So, for example, when the Rockefellers' Standard Oil monopoly in America started to butt up against Rothschild's Caspian and Black Sea Petroleum Company, what the Rothschilds said was they needed to get out of the business, too much competition, so they sold their oil company to Royal Dutch and to Shell, who at that time were separate. But the truth is that the Rockefellers are actually related by blood to the Rothschilds, and they've been working together since the very beginning. The Rockefeller clan, they continue to operate their global oil empire in cooperation with the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds, even though they appear to have sold their stuff, they continue to control, from behind the scenes, Royal Dutch Shell. So the world's wars for oil are very much the responsibility of the Rothschilds. Now, let's talk about another key figure other than Rockefeller. There's a Jewish family named Schiff that once had lived actually in the same house as the Rothschild family when they were back in Germany. These two families, the Schiffs and the Rothschilds, they're inseparable in their business dealings. So it's no surprise that Jacob Schiff, the most prominent, powerful Jewish leader of his day, was the Rothschild banking agent here in America. In fact, some historians consider Schiff to have been the single most influential man in American history. Schiff pushed really hard for the goal of establishing a central bank, of course, because that helps the Rothschilds make money. He wanted to establish a central bank in the United States, and from his seat of power on Wall Street, he even helped manufacture a massive financial crisis that ended up ruining millions of innocent Americans, making billions of dollars in profit for the Rothschilds, and providing some apparent necessity for the very central bank he was pushing for. In 1912, in the December issue of a magazine called Truth, it said this about Jacob Schiff, quote, "Mr. Schiff is head of the great private banking house of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, which represents the Rothschild interests on this side of the Atlantic. He has been described as financial strategist and has been for years the financial minister of the great impersonal power known as Standard Oil." So what we have here is a historical record, a documentation from 1912, that it was their assessment that Schiff was the Rothschild agent managing the Rockefeller oil empire through the Rothschild banks in America. Okay? Let's move forward. Next year, 1913, the Rothschilds managed to get their puppet, Woodrow Wilson, into the White House. Got him set up as the 28th president of the United States. Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. He's in my top 5 worst. Well, there was, as soon as he got into power, an Ashkenazi Jew named Samuel Untermyer went and visited the new president and blackmailed him. Untermyer was an attorney, and he had some pretty juicy dirt on Wilson. What had happened was Wilson had had an affair with a married woman back when Wilson was a professor at Princeton University. Had an affair with a married woman. Well, this Untermyer knew about this, had the secret goods, and blackmailed him. He said, "Look, here's what I'll do, Wilson. I will go pay this woman $40,000 in hush money to get her to agree to not talk about the affair." Because back then, in this time period, sexual infidelity marital infidelity was much more frowned upon than it is today, and it could destroy Wilson's chances of re-election. So that's the deal. But Untermyer wanted something in return. What he said was, in exchange for this favor, Wilson had to agree to nominate someone of Untermeyer's choosing when a vacancy opened up on the U.S. Supreme Court. Untermeyer was part of the Rothschild network. Now, folks, isn't this story unbelievable? Because we know that no U.S. president would ever use a Jewish attorney to give hush money to somebody he had an affair with, right? I keep telling you guys, history is a repeating cycle, and that's why I love it so much. We can understand the present by understanding things in the past. Well, some notable things happened in 1913. First, Jacob Schiff set up a little old organization called the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. You ever hear me talk about the Jewish Anti-Defamation League? You know, one of the two main Zionist groups that have thousands of censors working for YouTube to demonetize or delete videos like this one. And before I move on, please, folks, if you enjoy the straightforward, honest reporting that I do, I humbly ask for your financial support. Even a few dollars is helpful. This is my full-time job. I do not get paid for most of my YouTube videos because they get demonetized. I provide these videos for free. I don't get paid for it by YouTube because they don't want you to hear the truth about the Rothschilds or about Zionism. In fact, the original purpose that Rothschild agent Jacob Schiff set up the Anti-Defamation League, its primary purpose was to suppress public discussion of this Rothschild conspiracy by slandering anyone who told the truth about what the Rothschilds were doing. They would slander them and call them anti-Semites. Well, today the ADL's mission has evolved to...
Ain't no anti-Semites. It's Shemite. Cause we are sons of Shem. But they say Semite. Ain't no Semite, man. That's wicked. Ain't no Zionism. Okay, it's Zion.
To include slander against anyone who speaks out against the Zionist state of Israel. You talk about Israel and you're an anti-Semite. Well, thanks to the ADL, which was created by Jacob Schiff, the Rothschild agent in America. And indeed, these guys were engaged in a conspiracy. When the Rothschild puppets in America managed to force through Congress in 1913 the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank that Schiff had been pushing for, there was a very famous congressman named Charles Lindbergh who said this, quote, "The act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this bill," trust means monopoly. "When the president signs this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized. The greatest crime of the ages is perpetrated by this banking and currency bill." Talking about the one that set up the Federal Reserve. Well, it passes. And once a Rothschild-controlled central bank has been established to control the money supply in America, guess what time it is? It's time for war. The subject of Rothschild's involvement in the start of World War I is just way too broad for me to cover in this video, so I'll just summarize by making the point that the Rothschilds took advantage of the fighting during the war to infuse the governments of the United Kingdom, of France, of Italy, of Germany, with massive, massive loans that indebted those nations to the Rothschild family, to the bankers. Despite those nations being on different sides of the war, the Rothschilds financed both sides to make sure they had enough guns and bombs to keep the war going.
Now you see that? I just want to bring this out, man, because this is an Edomite letting you know, once again, another Edomite revealing the truth. Psalm 64 and 8. They make their tongue to fall upon them own selves, upon their own self. So, man, he letting you know that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers controls the entire earth, man. Okay? And he just told you they fund both sides of the war, man. So it's always a win-win with these demons, man. Okay? It's always a win-win, man. Now we know that the real Jews, the Hebrew Israelites, okay, this is Psalms 78 and verse 68. It reads, but chose the tribe of Judah, the Mount Zion, which he loved. Okay? So Yahweh chose Mount Zion, man. Okay? Read this again. Psalms 78, verse 68. But chose the tribe of Judah, the Mount Zion, which he loved. Not the so-called Jews. Okay, like it say in Revelation 2 and 9, he know the blasphemy of them who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogues of Satan. Same thing it say in Revelation 3 and 9. Okay, the real Jews are Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, man. Which, to get more technical, to get more specific, it's Judah, man. The so-called Negroes. Okay, that's one tribe, man. So, but the point of this lesson, man, is to show you that, hey, these Rothschilds set up the Balfour Declaration, man, to take over our land. Now, this is a good video, man. It's an hour and 16 minutes. I started it at like 16 minutes and 53 seconds. But it's good to watch it from the beginning, man. Because he started out talking about Winston Churchill with his demonic Satan ass, Luciferian, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's a good video, man. But this Edomite bring this truth out, man. Okay. So with that, I want to say all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shah, Bahashem Rekah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim pushing this truth throughout the four winds of the earth, waking up the hope for the elect. Shalom to the Agua who are listening and learning. Shalom.